Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the literal mind-bending work of Karl Friston. Now, if you haven't heard of him, he is actually the most cited neuroscientist in history. The guy is an absolute pioneer in brain imaging and theoretical neurobiology. And his ideas, well, they're fundamentally reshaping how we understand existence, life, and the human mind itself. So buckle up, because we are about to completely rewire how you experience reality.
Let's start with a really simple question. Do you actually see reality? The intuitive answer is yes, right? But the scientific answer is actually deeply unsettling. Think about it for a second. Your brain is permanently locked inside this dark, bony vault we call a skull. It has absolutely zero direct access to the outside world. It doesn't actually see light or hear sound. All it gets are these electrical signals, kind of like sensory shadows being cast on the inner walls of your sensory systems. So literally everything you think you're seeing right now, it's just your brain's absolute best guess of what's out there in the dark.
To kind of frame this, I love this poetic quote from Rumi. "You are not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a drop." It perfectly captures the sheer mystery of perception, doesn't it? Friston wrestles with this exact paradox all the time. Like, how are we so intimately glued to the chaotic soup of the universe, yet somehow distinct from it? How do we carve out a boundary for ourselves? Keep this poetry in the back of your mind, because we're about to ground it in some incredibly hard science.
Okay, let's dive into this. For the longest time, the standard view of the brain was what we'd call outside in. We basically thought the brain was a passive camera, just sitting there objectively recording the world. But Friston's view, it flips that entirely upside down. It's inside out. In his model, the brain is this highly active, constructive guessing machine. It's generating reality from the inside, creating a sort of hypothesis, and then it just uses the sensory data coming from the outside to check that hypothesis.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The brain's best guess. 2. The free energy principle. 3. The boundary of you. 4. When predictions break down. And 5. The social brain.
Let's kick things off with Section 1. The brain's best guess, unconscious inference.
Now, to be fair, this isn't a brand new concept. Way back in the 19th century, the great thinker Hermann von Helmholtz coined this term unconscious inference. He figured out that whatever we perceive actually has to be constructed on the inside first before it's consciously seen. Basically, perception is just a subconscious process of hypothesis testing. What Karl Friston has done is take that brilliant 19th century groundwork and engineer it into a rigorously mathematical modern framework.
And that framework operates through a loop known as predictive coding. It goes like this. Step 1, your brain generates a prediction about what it's about to experience. Step 2, your senses actually encounter the world. Step 3, if there is a mismatch between what was predicted and the incoming sensory data, the brain registers a prediction error. You then update your internal model to explain away that error. You are constantly, relentlessly trying to minimize prediction errors to make sense of the world. And if you can do that successfully, well, you survive.
Which brings us to Section 2, the free energy principle, minimizing surprise. Here's the absolute core of all this. In physics, surviving in a highly chaotic universe just means keeping your structure intact. If you don't, you literally dissolve into your environment. So the free energy principle states that the existential imperative for literally any system, whether we're talking about a single biological cell or a complex human being, is to minimize surprise. Variational free energy is essentially just a mathematical bound on that surprise. Simply put, existing means constantly acting and updating your beliefs to avoid biological surprises that could wipe you out. We desperately want a predictable world. Let's move to Section 3, the boundary of you, the Markov Blanket. To explain how we stay intact, Friston uses a statistical concept called a Markov Blanket. You can think of it as the ultimate statistical veil. It's the mathematical boundaries separating a system's internal states, your inside, from the vast external universe. This blanket is made up of sensory states, which take data in, and active states, which push action out. This porous boundary is literally what makes existence possible. It's the only thing keeping you distinct from dissolving back into the primordial soup. But let's look at the difference between just passively existing and actually being alive. Take a drop of oil in a glass of water. It has a Markov blanket. It passively self-organizes, minimizing free energy to maintain its boundary, so it doesn't mix with the water. But a living tadpole? It takes things a massive step further. It uses what's called active inference. It doesn't just sit there waiting for things to happen. It swims. It moves. It physically changes the world to actively sample new data that fulfills its predictions. That movement, that active sampling,
That's exactly what separates biological life from mere physical existence.
Let's transition to Section 4, when predictions break down, computational psychiatry.
So, what happens when this guessing machine misfires? Friston frames psychopathology entirely and partially as computational glitches. Think about it. If perception is inference, then mental disorders are basically false inference. On the left here, we have type 1 errors. That's inferring things that are not there, which mathematically maps onto hallucinations and delusions, like what we see in schizophrenia. On the right are type 2 errors. That's inferring things are not there when they actually are. That maps to neurological neglect syndromes, where, say, a patient literally might not recognize their own arm. At the end of the day, it's all about an imbalance in how the brain weights the precision of sensory evidence versus its prior beliefs.
A classic example of this is the hollow mask illusion. A healthy brain looks at a hollow mask, which curves inward, right? But we actually hallucinate a normal outward-facing face. Why? Because our incredibly strong prior belief that faces stick out completely overrides the raw sensory data. But here's a really counterintuitive fact. People with schizophrenia often see this illusion completely accurately, as a hollow concave mask, because computationally, their brains assign much higher precision to the raw sensory data coming in than to those false prior beliefs. So in this highly specific instance, their guessing machine is actually seeing reality more accurately because of how it weights the evidence.
We can also look at severe autism through this exact same computational lens. Friston suggests that in this state, the brain simply cannot ignore any sensory data. It's assigning ultra-high precision to absolutely everything. It effectively cranks up the volume on all prediction errors. So if you can't rely on simple prior beliefs to filter out the noise, you get glued to the overwhelming details of the sensorium. The repetitive behaviors we often see are essentially attempts to make a highly unpredictable, totally overwhelming world feel predictable again.
And finally, Section 5, the social brain, theory of mind.
When you're navigating our highly complex social world, let's be honest, the most chaotic, unpredictable things you will ever encounter are other human beings. So how on earth do we minimize surprise around each other? We develop a theory of mind. We adopt this really convenient, simplifying hypothesis that those other moving objects out there are just like us. We assume that you have a generative model in your head exactly like the one in mind. By doing this, we create a shared reality. And that shared reality is what allows for complex planning, communication, and taking turns. It makes a chaotic social world suddenly manageable.
I want to leave you with this final, highly provocative thought. When we zoom out and look at ideology, at language, at human culture, are these things simply massive, shared, generative models? Are our shared cultures actually just our individual Markov blankets linking up, trying to minimize surprise and free energy together in a chaotic universe? It's a profoundly beautiful way to view the human condition, reducing the entire grand theater of society to the mathematical poetry of existence. Thank you so much for exploring Karl Friston's groundbreaking world with me in this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the reality your brain is guessing.